Well, today finds me on the banks of the Connecticut River. I'm in Cornish, New Hampshire right now, but I won't be for long because right in the center of your screen is my goal for today. I'm going to be doing a tree study as we climb what's called Mount Ascutney, which is just across the Connecticut River from Cornish, New Hampshire, near the town of Windsor, Vermont, and Brownsville, Vermont, and a few other towns on the slopes of or at the bottom of Mount Ascutney. Mount Ascutney sticks up by itself several thousand feet higher than the surrounding hills. So this is not flat land by any means. This is rolling to steep hillsides along the Connecticut River. But Ascutney itself is 3,144 feet, I believe, and most of the hilltops around here are less than 1,500 feet. And the river itself is less than 500 feet. So it sticks up by itself relative to the elevation of the other hills around here. It's called the geological monadnock. I'll do a little bit more with that as the day goes on, but boy, the longest covered bridge in the world is right at the bottom of the mountain here, crossing the Connecticut River between Cornish, New Hampshire on the left of the screen and Windsor, Vermont on the right. So I had to stop here first just to see this bridge. You can still drive across it. It's got two spans with a pillar in the middle to support it. So I'll make a quick video of that bridge when we go by it. But I am going to post this video to both the Barkin Up the Right Tree channel today and Let's Dig a Little Deeper, which is my channel for exploring. When I say dig a little deeper, I don't always mean looking for things in the ground. I mean getting under the surface and trying a little harder to find things that aren't easy to find. Sometimes it refers to geology, sometimes it refers to just getting off the trail or going to parks that are lesser known. So digging deeper into what's available to discover. So I'm going to put this on both channels because I think it'll be of interest to viewers on both channels. And I've had a fairly big increase in the views on the Let's Dig a Little Deeper channel in the last few months. And quite a few new subscribers, and I'm not sure how many of those people know about my Barkin Up the Right Tree channel. So I'm going to put this on both, but my goal today is going to be to study how the forest changes from the bottom of Mount Ascutney near the Connecticut River here to the top. Just that elevation increase alone there would be a change in the community of plants, the trees, and also not just because of the colder weather on top of the mountain, but also because the Connecticut River provides a pathway for more southern oak hickory type forests to come north into New England. And the high elevation of Mount Ascutney allows a place for the plants that are more common in Maine and extreme northern New Hampshire to survive at a cooler climate relative to this valley. So we'll put this on both channels. And I'm going to be concentrating mostly on the forests and the trees. We'll do some tree ID on the way up and at least acknowledge the trees that we're finding on the way up. We'll see how many different species we can find in what's going to be about a 5-mile hike to the summit. There are trails on all sides of this mountain. I'm going to try for what's called the Futures Trail, which starts at the campground on the east side of the mountain, and it's about 4.5 miles to the top. I think that might give us the most variety of plants to see. It starts almost at the river here. And I can't really make a loop because of the way the other trails go, but I'm going to go up that trail, make a loop around the top, and then come back down the same side of the mountain. That side of the mountain also has a road that I could walk down if I'm running out of time or just want to speed up the descent. So let's go check out the trees of Mount Ascutney. Let's go bark up Mount Ascutney, Vermont. This is east central Vermont. We're just south of White River Junction, so about a third the way up the state on the eastern border. As you can see and probably hear, the cars still use this bridge, and it's the only bridge for several miles in either direction, so it's gets a lot of use for that reason. It's a Sunday morning early, and it's obvious this bridge is essential because it's getting a lot of traffic at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. So here's a little more information about the bridge. There's been a bridge here since before 1866, but the ones that were here before that all were damaged or washed away by floods. When they built it in 1866, they got it right, and it's been here ever since. There's some more information on this historical, amazing place. I planned the hike up Mountain Ascutney several months ago. Didn't realize this bridge was here, but when I realized it was, I wanted to take the time to record this as well. So let's go climb what's called the Futures Trail, and we'll start recording as soon as we get to that trailhead. Well, a couple minutes into this hike, I'm going to record something that's become a rarity in many parts of the country, including southern New England, and that's a healthy white ash tree. Got this bark that has these ridges and furrows, and they interlace like the braids in a stream. They grow pretty straight, and all kinds of leaves still on the tree up there. It's third week of September, so I don't expect a lot of color today, except on the trees that are stressed from dry soil, which parts of this mountain may have that. Looking up at it from the bottom, I didn't see a lot of color, but I did see some patches of color. So how deep the soil is and which way it faces, whether the sun or away from the sun, affects how quickly the soil dries out. Our ashes grow straight usually. They have opposite branching, which we can't see from here because the tree is so tall. But none of those D-shaped holes that you find from the emerald ash borer in this bark, and no signs of disease. From what I've read and been told, is the emerald ash borer cannot withstand extremely cold weather. So that may be one way that the ash trees don't all die, is as you go further north in New England, it can get extremely cold in the middle of the winter, especially when there's snowpack. -20, -30, which makes it tough going for a oriental or a pest from another part of the world, from the Far East, that is not acclimated to that type of weather. We are starting to get a little bit of color here on some of these trees. We're at 700 feet above sea level. We got 3,100 at the summit. So one of the reasons I decided to hike up this side of the mountain is we're coming up from the Connecticut Valley. The river's just not even a mile from here, east of here. So there's some trees that follow the river north that you wouldn't find away from the Connecticut Valley. Here's a hickory. And I don't know how many other hickories we're going to find on this mountain. This is one you tend to find further north than the mocker nut hickory. But it does show mocker nut coming about to this area. But this guy has a compound leaf, but it doesn't have the opposite branching that our white ash does. Now that white ash, I couldn't see the branching because the tree was so tall. But I can see the branching on this hickory tree, and the branches do come off in a staggered pattern. Here's one going one way, here's one going the other way, and then one going the other way. But the bark, it looks a lot like that white ash tree, with these ridges and furrows. One way I can tell the bitternut hickory from the other hickories is the terminal bud. Instead of being teardrop shaped, it's kind of just almost looks like two leaves ready to open, and it's sulfur colored, the color of The mineral sulfur, if you ever seen that, or fool's gold even. It's an orangish yellow color, kind of fuzzy. So if you find a tree with lower branches, you can tell it's a bitternut hickory by the buds alone. And the fruits are unique too. If I can find some, I'll record those. But right next to it is another tree that can grow up in elevation in New England and upstate New York. It's not always down in the river valleys only. But I saw a lot of it by that covered bridge. And again, this has a bark that could look like the other trees, with ridges and furrows. That braided pattern. It almost never grows straight. It's usually leaning or bending. And it usually grows in 2s or 3s or 10s and clumps. You can find individual basswood trees, but you usually don't. And it often has rows of holes in it from the yellow-bellied sapsucker. I did a whole segment on basswood in 2023 on Barking Up the Right Tree channel that showed in detail what that sapsucker holes look like, and we looked at them through the winter and early spring till midsummer, looked at the fruits, the flowers. So there's a lot more information on basswood trees on Barking Up the Right Tree. But they're beautiful trees, good source for honey. And also, wood carvers love it. It's great carving wood. I think this little bitternut hickory here also shows that opposite or alternate branching right here. So ashes have compound leaves, usually more than 5 leaflets. Hickories have compound leaves. Or excuse me, the ashes have opposite branching. The blue ash, the green ash, the black ash, and the white ash all have opposite branching with compound leaves with more than 5 leaflets. Hickories have alternate branching. Some have 5 leaflets on the compound leaf, but this bitternut, the mocker nut, and the shellbark all have more than 5 leaflets. This one has 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So that's one way we can tell them apart. I'm working on a segment on red hickory, which has kind of confused me for several years, but I am going to publish that later in 2024, maybe early 2025. And it has compound leaves that usually have more than 7 leaflets, or 5 leaflets, but not always. And let's see if we can find some of those more southern hickories on this hike before we get up too high in elevation. And meanwhile, we'll be looking at the maples and birches, which are common in central New England. And just maybe a third of a mile up the hill here, starting to get some nice color. Some of these maples are starting to turn. Some of the birches are starting to turn. And it's still pretty early, but again, it's been fairly dry lately, so often trees will turn early if they're stressed. And the leaves become a liability because they're losing water out the leaves during the photosynthesis and not gaining much at this point in the year. So if the soil is dry and the plant decides it's time to shut down for the winter, it will, and turn early. Shaggy bark. Now, I don't know if we're going to find a shagbark hickory today, but we've got a hop hornbeam here with shaggy bark. The way we can tell this shaggy bark tree from others with shaggy bark is the shags are only about a 1/4 inch wide. And they're thin, and the trees normally don't get that wide. Maybe 6, 8 inches, maybe a foot if you're lucky. They're slow growing, nicknamed ironwood because the wood is slow growing. It's very dense and very tough, and was great for making tool handles. So this guy's actually 40, 50 feet high. It can be an understory tree, but it often gets as tall as the other trees around it, at least at times, so it gets pretty big for an understory tree. We'll look at the leaves if we can find some. This guy's too tall. There's another one right there with a white oak sapling growing right next to it. So no, this is not a white oak tree right here. That's your hop hornbeam. We'll have to find the parent white oak tree, but white oak comes up the Connecticut Valley. The range map showing it come about halfway up Vermont, so we're getting near the northern end of its range, but we're low elevation here. The white oak has rounded lobes. And our northern red oak, which grows much further north than the other oaks, has pointy lobes, as you can see right here. So there's a northern red oak seedling and a white oak seedling growing in these woods. We'll see if we can find the parent trees and the acorns from them. Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to start at this lower elevation trailhead is to try to find trees that are near the northern edge of their limit on the bottom half of the mountain, and then obviously we can find the ones that are adapted or used to colder weather at the top. So birches, there should be at least 3 species of birch out here today. We've already seen paper birch. We'll look at that in a minute. It's pretty common. This birch here is very common in southern New England and throughout the central and southern Appalachians. It's the one you find the most. This birch peels like the other birches peel when it gets older, but the younger trees are often smooth bark till about age 50. When the bark does peel on this black birch, it's thick. It's like the layers of a corrugated cardboard. And if we can find a younger black birch, we'll look at one. And right down here is a paper birch where the bark peels, but it's a very thin, papery thickness. I think we'll probably find yellow birch today too, and it peels in paper thin as well. So here's your paper birch, which is white in color and peels in thin paper-like layers. Another black birch right here. These woods have probably been left alone for long enough that the black birches that are here are getting older and starting to get that thick, thicker bark that peels in about 1/4 inch thick sheets. So these lenticels are on the younger trees. This is all you see on the bark of the younger trees, but as the trees get older they crack and the bark starts to peel off in these about 1/4 inch thick sheets on the black birch. So yes, that black birch is near the northern end of its geographic range, so I'm guessing that it probably doesn't come that far up the mountain in elevation as well, because going up the mountain is like going further north as far as the temperature and the climate. So we'll see if we find it as we go up. The yellow birch and the paper birch can grow almost to tree line, which we're not going to get near today, so I would expect to find those on the entire hike where the soil and the climate, the soil moisture is suitable. Paper birch isn't too picky. It'll grow in any type of soil. Yellow birch needs moist soil. Okay, we started with some bitternut hickory a little while ago. Here's a larger tree, about a foot and a half in diameter. Probably has the least furrowed bark of the hickories. The mockernut hickory is not too deeply furrowed, but it's a little bit more evenly furrowed and a darker gray than this color. And the nuts are quite unique. They have these ridges that stick up. And that yellowish hue in places as well, the same color we saw on the terminal buds there. So almost looks like an X in the middle of the fruit or the nut. Name bitternut implies they're not palatable. Well, there's been northern red oak along this trail the entire 3/4 of a mile that we've hiked. Here's some leaves on a sapling, again with the pointed lobes. Now scarlet oak and black oak get that as well. Their ranges end right about this part of Vermont, so I don't know if there's any here. But this is one we can find all the way up into Canada and often up above 2,000 feet if the soil is dry and the area is burned. I found northern red oak on Welch Mountain in New Hampshire at over 2,000 feet a couple of years ago. The whole mountainside was covered in it. It came in after a forest fire. Geology. We'll spend just a few minutes looking at the rocks here. There's a reason why this mountain sticks up 2,000 feet higher than the rest of them. What we have here is a chunk of the mountain that's broke free. and it's in layers. It's a little hard to see them here, but you can see these white layers and the darker layers. And that's all you see driving up I-91 is what's called a metamorphic rock that's mostly schist and gneiss. That was a layered rock, like a sandstone or a shale, that got warmed up in the Earth's crust during mountain folding and still retained its layered look, but also the minerals started congregating into crystals, like this quartz here. Sometimes you can find mica. A little bit of garnet right here. I believe that's garnet right there. The center of this mountain is all syenite and granite. And we'll start seeing that as we go up the mountain. I looked at the geology map before I started the hike, and we should start finding that. And I've got a snack cake, which I'm famous for, I guess, to help demonstrate how the granite and the syenite, which is a kind of a type of granite, domed up to form this mountain that's much higher than the surrounding ones. Here's our layered rock right here. And this northern red oak, as I just mentioned, has been our constant companion up this mountain. Probably about 1,000 feet in elevation right now, but I wouldn't be surprised to find it further up the mountain. Often has flat top ridges with furrows in between them. Sometimes they get like a snaking pattern near the bottom, but not always. Evergreens. We'll keep an eye out for red spruce. It grows on top of the mountain, and it may be growing on the bottom third of the mountain, but I don't see any yet, so it's more likely to be found on the top half of the mountain. And balsam fir, again, much higher elevations is where you often find that. But we've got plenty of hemlock here, plenty of white pine. There's our white pine cone. Oh, and there's our hemlock cone. Not even a half-inch in size. And here's some pretty small red oak acorns. They get a lot bigger than this. Here's one right here. That's your more average size. May have been from last year because the cap came loose right away. It wasn't green. And there you go. Here's another one right here. So the cap just comes maybe an eighth of the way down the acorn. And while I was down near the white oak sapling, I did find some white oak acorns, which have a different shape on top. It's more cone shaped. So I've seen different takes on the white oak acorn. These don't look quite like what I'm used to finding, but the tree sapling was there, so there had to have been a parent tree around there somewhere. I never found it. I wasn't trying that hard to find it. It wasn't by the trail. Back to evergreens. We just looked at white pine and hemlock cones. I believe we have some native red pine back here. This is often planted by roadsides and usually doesn't spread from those plantation areas, but this is the kind of place we will find it on dry soil. And the red bark that breaks free easily. And it's a tall, straight tree. It'll grow as tall as every tree. As long as it can stay ahead of them, it won't die, but it does need sun. So the fact that it's here tells me that this area hasn't always had a lot of deep shade, but it's probably gone through succession. And the red pine came in when there was more sun available, and it's here now, but it may not be here forever if we don't get some sun to help these cones turn into new red pine trees. So often fires can assist with that, or logging, or wind throws, or natural storm damage. But it's very red and very thin little plates to come off it. Almost look like little raindrops landed on it. Right here. There's a raindrop right there. And the cones are more round than these white pine cones. So there's a white pine cone, and there's your red pine cone. I think we're going to be coming to an overlook soon. We're at about 1,200 feet. And often you don't find red spruce quite this low, but the further north you go, the more likely you are to find it at lower elevation. So that's exactly what we have here. And the fact that there's a lot of red spruce on top of this mountain makes it easy to have a population down this low as well. So here's a smaller red spruce right here, but I think we're going to find some big ones at top. This mountain has been logged, but it's been a while since that happened, and could be some pretty big ones up there. So we got prickly little needles. They don't have any lines on them. The hemlocks we found, or been walking under all day. We found the cone. They have lines on the back, 2 white lines. So does the balsam fir. The red pine and the white pine, the needles all come in bundles instead of individually, like you see here. And the red spruce tends to be a little bit shiny, and the new growth at least is kind of orangish. And the bark on the larger trees looks like purple potato chips. Now, black cherry has that same appearance. If we find black cherry today, we'll look at that. But the purple potato chips on this bark help us tell it from the other trees. So here's our purple potato chips, about the size of corn chips almost, all kind of glued onto the tree. And right here, we can do a direct comparison of the foliage or needles of the red spruce, which if you take one off and roll it in your fingers, it kind of feels square with no lines on it. And here's our hemlock, which again, the further north we go, the less disease we find on these trees, fortunately. So the hemlock woolly adelgid has not caused as many problems this far north. So there's plenty of healthy looking hemlocks here with flat needles that aren't terribly long, and they all have those white stripes on the back. We've come about a mile up the Futures Trail. There's a vista to our left here. You can take a look at the rock that forms the core of Mount Ascutney. What we saw earlier was metamorphic rocks that were in layers, but the layers had all been kind of folded and twisted and mixed together almost like a marbled cake. Well, when you get a dome of granite, or in this case a lot of this mountain is syenite, which is granite with less quartz in the mix, when you get a dome, it often peels off like an onion. It has a rounded shape. The ledges have a rounded shape. So there we are. This is our dome of either granite or syenite. I've got the map downloaded on my tablet. I'm not going to take it out right now, but there's both up here. But most of the mountain is labeled as syenite, not granite, but similar type rock. Just the type of mineral, the proportion of minerals is slightly different with less quartz. So I don't know if this is a natural clearing or one that was created. This is a very nice trail though, and it's not busy. I've seen maybe 7 people, 8 people so far. And there are some natural overlooks on this mountain. Here's some more of our syenite or quartz, or granite. Certainly looks like granite to me, but I'm not going to take it for granted that it's granite without looking at the map. I have a feeling this is probably cleared. Basically, there's a lot of trees still here. I have a feeling this was made for our enjoyment, so let's enjoy the view. I think we also have some red pine that we can look at up close here. So we're looking down the Connecticut River Valley. These are lower hills here, probably under 1,500 feet in elevation. And I believe this is a red pine, unless it's a pitch pine, but I don't think it is. Okay, here's some red pine cones that are still kind of immature. One way we can tell it's not a pitch pine is the pitch pine, the cone scales have little hooks on the end. Look like almost like a fishing hook. And these don't. These have needles that come in bunches of 2. Pitch pine has needles in bunches of 3. And the red pine needles snap when you bend them. And if you bend them back again, they break in half completely. Usually on the first snap, it almost breaks, and then you bend it back again, and there it goes. So the pitch pine needles are more rubbery. But this is where red pine and pitch pine want to grow. In full sun, with lots of openings for the cones to take root. And ledges like this is where the populations will often persist. And the ones we saw earlier would probably not be there in 100 years unless Mother Nature were to provide more sunlight by removing some of the trees that it's competing with. But boy, this red pine here, he's growing all over the place here. And this time of year, some of the older needles will turn brown and it will shed needles. That's normal for the white pine right here and the red pine. I was on Ascutney Mountain for Let's Dig a Little Deeper channel a couple years ago and found red pine, white pine, and pitch pine on the same ledge. That's about 50 miles south of here near Brattleboro, Vermont, but it's on the New Hampshire side of the river. That video is still on Let's Dig a Little Deeper channel. I also have a separate video on red pine on barking up the right tree, and part of that video I did record on Ascutney Mountain. Well, we've done about half the elevation gain and about half the distance on this Futures Trail. About 2.5 miles into the distance. And it's a little over 4 miles to where the name of the trail ends, but then it's a few tenths more to the summit. So, where we stopped last was called Bare Rock Vista. Well named. B-A-R-E. Like no trees, or not a lot of trees on that ledge. And we had the red pine, the white pine, the red spruce, the hemlock, and a bunch of oak up there. Well, since then we've been in mostly what's called northern hardwoods, and red oak was along the way too, so that's not really considered a northern hardwood, but it's been common until recently. We've kind of lost it at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. Let's just look at some northern hardwoods here. Places where there's fires or storm damage, we can get a fire cherry, and I can't see much more than the tree itself. It may actually be dead, but it's still here. They're a short-lived tree. They're a pioneer species, and here's one that fell to the ground and has these large lenticels on it. Almost could be confused with the black birch, but not quite. More of our hop hornbeam. It's a northern hardwood. It should keep growing right up to where we get into more spruce and fir trees. Maples. Vermont's famous for maples. Striped maple isn't one of the ones you get maple syrup from. I don't know if you could, but I don't think they try because it doesn't usually get more than 6-8 inches across, but it has these stripes on it. And it's very common in the understory. I've seen it the entire hike. I just didn't record it till now. Here's another one right here. And sugar maple itself has been common throughout this hike. Here's a medium-sized sugar maple with even brown bark. It's a little less gray, more brown than a red maple. The flakes of the bark tend to peel off. Like the door opens like a hinge on the side instead of on the top. I've done a lot with that tree, so we don't need to do a lot with that. Plenty of sugar maple saplings coming up here. That's the leaf you see right here. And a little bit of yellow birch coming in. I would expect to find more of this as we ascend this mountain. When you get in areas with a lot of oak and hickory, you don't find as much yellow birch because it demands a lot of moisture that isn't always available where those trees are growing. And speaking of hickory, I just looked at the range map. We are right at the northern end of the range for bitternut hickory. We're also at the northern end of the range for black birch, and the northern end of the range for white oak. So that's one of the reasons why I picked this hike. There aren't too many places where you can find those more central Appalachian, southern New England trees mixed in with the northern trees all on the same hike. That's why this mountain is unique, because of its unique geographic location. Here's some more of that yellow birch. So it peels just like the paper birch at a younger age, but you can see the yellowish color. If we find a large yellow birch, a couple hundred years old, we will see how the bark varies, but much of this mountain was logged. There's actually the remains of what's called a steam donkey, which was a steam-powered machine that hauled the logs out of the steeper ravines. I don't think I'm going to take the time to go see it. It's off trail a few tenths of a mile. Probably won't take the time to go see that, but that is available on this hike, on the Futures Trail hike. Let's keep climbing. None of this is technically difficult. There's not a lot of open ledge or scrambling. I haven't needed to use my hands at all. On that last stop, we looked at what I call northern hardwoods. They continued on. We're up to 2,000 feet elevation now. Just starting to see some of the plants we'll find near the summit of Mount Ascutney. And we found red spruce down near 800, 900 feet above sea level, 1,000 feet, pretty close to the bottom of the hike. But when you're in the spruce fir zone, the fir, which is balsam fir around here, usually you find that as you go up higher. So red spruce can come down the mountains further in elevation, and the balsam can go up higher the mountains in elevation than the red spruce. So they overlap, but if you go like in the White Mountains where you get above tree line, you lose the red spruce before you get to tree line. It's replaced by black spruce and the balsam fir, which I'm looking at right here. This is the first one I found on today's hike. Continues on to tree line. So balsam fir has needles that resemble hemlock, except the branches are exactly opposite each other, not almost opposite each other, like you would find on a hemlock. The needles are longer. It's my thumbnail for scale. And they do have 2 white lines on the back. And sap blisters on the bark. I can't quite see that on this little tree here, but it's there, just hard to record. So we'll look at that later. I'm sure there'll be plenty more of these to look at. And they're very fragrant. You just scratch just a little bit of the bark loose, you get a wonderful smell. It's often the smell you get from Christmas trees. Balsam fir and Fraser fir are commonly grown for Christmas trees. We're going to keep hiking. It looks from the satellite view like it makes an abrupt change from northern hardwoods to spruce fir on the top of this mountain. The reason for that, I'm not exactly sure. It may be due to logging or other reasons. But it doesn't look like it's going to be a gradual transition, but an abrupt transition. We'll keep looking at that as it comes along, and anything else of interest. But we're definitely lost all the northern red oak at this point. I think we've seen our last one maybe a mile ago. And we're in American Beech, sugar maple, yellow birch, plenty of this striped maple, and some balsam fir. And we're up at about 2,500 feet elevation now. Some pretty big yellow birch up here, big enough that it's starting to lose a little bit of that peeling appearance, and it's starting to get the appearance that that black birch had with these thicker flakes. It's a different color than black birch, and we've lost the black birch quite a ways down the mountain. It's at the northern end of its range, and probably only on the bottom 1,000 feet of this mountain, at least on this trail. So you can see those thicker flakes there. So yellow birch doesn't always have that real thin papery bark, but it does when it's younger. Granite and syenite and doming. Boy, we can see it right here. There's a natural crack in this rock here. And there are quarries on this mountain too. I don't think we're going to get to them today. There's only so many hours in the day. They're near where we're going, but I might need to take the time to do other things at the summit, like look at the views. So our doming, I said the rocks peel off like layers of an onion. You can see that right here. This is not sedimentary rock. This is igneous rock. This is syenite at this part of the mountain. Where we looked at it down below, I said you could take it for granite. Well, it was granite there. I just looked at the geology map. So this it's a little less pink in color, more of a dull white color from the different feldspars that are in here, and syenite has less quartz than granite. We're not going to get into all that today. I just wanted to explain that the reason this mountain stands up above the rest is because it's a geological dome. And the rocks at the middle of the dome which is right in the middle of this screen here, are much younger than the light green and the blue and the orange around it. So the kind of the darker pink and the lighter pink are syenite and granite that domed up through the layered rocks that we looked at the start of this hike. I just happened to have a snack cake. It's the same color as what's on the map. And this represents the dome of syenite and granite that came up through the Earth's crust. We'll continue this demonstration back at the campsite. I had accidentally turned the camera off when I thought I had it on. So, originally, the pink coconut and the marshmallow here represent sedimentary rocks. They were folded into mountains, metamorphic rocks. They became metamorphic rocks. And then the dome of the syenite and granite, which is represented by the chocolate cake and the cream filling there, domed up and pushed those sedimentary rocks, which became metamorphic rocks, up. Because those rocks are softer over millions of years, they were eroded away, and what was left was Mount Ascutney in the middle of this geological dome. And if we can take away a few more of those sedimentary and metamorphic rocks, metasedimentary rocks is what they're called, we're left with the dome of syenite and granite with just a few pieces of the schist and gneisses, which are those sedimentary rocks that became metamorphic during the mountain building, around the edges of Mount Ascutney. So we saw those early in the hike, and then we started seeing at Bear Rock the granite dome, and then further up at that what looked like a quarry, which was a natural crack in the rock as far as I could tell, was the syenite, which is just a variation of granite, a variation in the amount of minerals that are in it. So that's what we got here. That's why this mountain sticks up so much higher than the hills around it that are made out of just, in this case, the coconut and the marshmallow cream. Well, we're at about 2,700 feet in elevation, only 400 feet of climbing. We've come over 2,000 feet of climbing. Going to be about a half-mile in elevation gain, 2,600, 2,700 feet, and 4.5 miles of walking. So that's not terribly steep. It hasn't been that tough. Certainly not as rocky as most trails in New England, and not as heavily used either. There's several other ways up the mountain that get more use. And I've been looking at the satellite views off and on today, and we still have hardwood trees above us. That's what's showing up on the satellite view, but what's in the understory is probably the future of this forest. We got plenty of this balsam fir like we saw about a mile back. There's more of it here, but only in the sapling form. And same with the red spruce that we've been seeing off and on throughout the hike today. So there's a reason why it goes from mostly hardwoods to what's showing up is mostly spruce and fir. A quick transition. There was a logging operation nearby here. It could be the reason. They may have removed all the spruce and fir and just left the hardwoods, or they may have removed everything. And maybe they couldn't or didn't try to get to the spruce and fir on the summit. But it actually goes down the arms of these mountains quite a distance. The valley we've been in is all northern hardwoods, but some of the ridges right near here are covered in what looks like spruce and fir. Just an overview of what we've done today. I've put little black circles along the Futures Trail, and we're almost up to the summit here. There's a couple overlooks that I'm going to try to get to. We'll take the futures link here, try to get to Castle Rock and Brownsville Rock. There is an observation tower at the top. I might go to that, but I like to go to places that are more natural. If I have time, I might go up that and get the 360-degree view. And then I'm going to just walk back down from the observation tower area down the road. I can get down the road. It's 4.5 miles. I can do that in an hour and a half without roots and rocks and recording to slow me down. So we're in the transition zone, and I wouldn't be surprised if in 50 years these saplings of the balsam fir and the red spruce become the dominant forest here, because at other elevations, other places on this mountain at the same elevation we're at, it is dominant. At least it looks that way from the satellite view. Let's go up a little higher and we'll see what a spruce fir forest really looks like and take a look at some of those views. Okay, well, we've made it to the area around Castle Rock Overlook. Here's some more of our purple potato chip bark on these red spruce trees. Small potato chips, maybe the size of a Fritos corn chip. Again, black Jerry get that same appearance. Haven't seen any today. But it obviously doesn't have the same branching, and it's not evergreen. So unless you're not paying attention to the whole tree, you're never going to mistake the two. Underneath it is our balsam fir. That's going to be the next generation of what's here. There's a lot of balsam fir trees coming in underneath these spruce trees. Balsam fir doesn't live as long as spruce, but it can grow in the shade of other trees, unlike some trees. This one doesn't have too many sap blisters on it. It's an older tree. It's probably losing some of its vitality. But the younger trees have these little, look like mosquito bites on them that are full of sap. We'll see if we find some that are oozing. But today, these are pretty dry. This tree's getting near the end of its life. So we've got the forest here is red spruce and balsam fir above us, with just a few birches in the mix. Let's go take a look at the view from this Castle Rock. There's the sign for it right here. So I believe this, like the Bear Rock overlook, they may have cut a few trees down to give you this overlook. Or the trees are just growing back where a bigger overlook or more expansive view used to be. That's possible too, especially since this area probably was logged. Takes a while for the trees to get back to full height. We do have a great view looking east here. I don't have all the peaks memorized in this area, but I'll do the best I can to name some of them. Monadnock is pretty easy to tell. It's by itself. It's to our southeast. It's almost the same elevation as here, and it's triangular shaped. So and that mountain is a geological monadnock that sticks up from about 1,000 to 1,500 feet elevation. So this one is actually higher from the Connecticut River Valley. It's 2,800 feet. And we can see the Connecticut River from here. I don't think we're going to see that covered bridge. East of here, I don't have all the peaks in southern and central New Hampshire memorized by shape or name from this vantage. We got one right there. It's probably almost as tall as where we're standing right now. The Connecticut River is right down there. Boy, and if I could make a video with just sounds and smells, it'd still be incredible, because you can smell the balsam fir up here. You can hear the red squirrels and the ravens making their noise. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, some of the ridges on this mountain have balsam fir and red spruce down in elevation a lot lower than we were hiking through. I think you can see that over here. We were kind of between where I'm standing and that next ridge. We were down in a valley that was all northern hardwoods, but what looks like red spruce and possibly balsam fir actually made its way down that ridge. quite a distance, probably to where the Bear Rock overlook was. We just didn't stay on that ridge. Let's go around the corner to what's called Brownsville Rock. That'll be looking in the other direction. And we're on the summit ridge here. The elevation doesn't go up too much more. We're at the highest forest of the mountain. It definitely has that evergreen look. No pines up here. I mean, it could be a pine, but there really aren't. It's all red spruce and balsam fir. Just an occasional birch. So this is a boreal forest. If you go up higher in elevation in the Green Mountains around Killington Peak, Mount Mansfield, this is what you see. And in the White Mountains as well, to about 4,500 to 5,000 feet, and then you get above tree line. So we started down in what was almost an oak hickory forest, and went through some areas with a lot of different pines. There's many different pines around that Bear Rock overlook, and then we got into mostly northern hardwoods for probably 2.5 miles. And then the evidence of these spruce and fir trees started coming back for us to see. And now that's all we see. So that's why I picked this hike today, just because of the variety of trees and for the views. So let's take a look at a few more views. I'm going to kind of stop talking about trees at this point. And this is the Brownsville overlook down here. Let's go check this one out. And here we are. Again, I'm not sure if this is a natural overlook or if it was cleared. But we'll take the overlook when we can get it. See the joints in the rock here go down quite a distance. That could be tricky in the wintertime if there was some wind-blown snow. That could be really tricky because that would blow right in, and one bad step and you're probably not going to fall in it, but you could hurt yourself. You can see to our north it's hilly but not mountainous, with lots of farms. And then about 15-20 miles to our west, I believe this is Killington Peak in the center of your screen. The ski trails are, I can see them pretty well, but they're kind of being backlit. But it's a big ski area. Just next to it, that little bump right there is Pico Peak. Ski trails on that face the other way. I know from skiing in Okemo you can see Ascutney, but I think it's just beyond these trees here. So Okemo, which is a little bit higher than here, but not much, is just behind these trees right there. And Killington Peak is about 1,000 feet higher than where we're standing, and would be covered in these red spruce and balsam fir. Maybe even some black spruce at that highest elevation. I've only skied it, never took time to really study the trees from the ski trails. And I don't believe the trails go to the exact top anyway. So let's take a look at this view a little bit more. I said I may not be interested in the observation tower, but I think if I can get the view looking the other ways, I'll go ahead and check it out and record that as well. If there's a lot of people up there, I probably won't do any talking though. Well, we're going to put the wraps on this adventure today. I got to the observation platform. There was a lot of people up there. There was some dogs. It was a little hazy, so I didn't try to record what was up there for that reason. We're walking back down the road, which has some nice overlooks and lots of spruce along here. It's real woodsy. Still has that northern forest, boreal forest feel. I think we had about 15 species of trees we looked at today. There may have been 1 or 2 more. I could have gotten a few more, but I didn't want to overload the video with content. Sometimes less is more, and try to brush over lightly than make it an encyclopedia video. We're going to finish today with where we started. I'm looking straight down at the Cornish Windsor covered bridge. And it's still 2,000 feet below us here. We've come down in elevation, but not that much. And there it is right there. There's a railroad bridge right in front of it, but it's right there. And then we'll zoom out. The haze is kind of thinned out in the last hour since I was at the summit. So we're getting some pretty good views into New Hampshire now. And yes, you can see the White Mountains today. I can't pick out Mount Washington today, but it's out there somewhere. That's looking in the general direction of the White Mountains. And then the smaller mountains south of the White Mountains are in view too. So I don't know them all by name from this angle, especially looking from this direction. But if you drive up the road, it's about a half-a-mile walk to the Summit Observation Tower. And there they have a sketch map showing each peak that's visible from there, including Mount Washington, many of the ones in Vermont, Mount Greylock, Massachusetts, and several others south of here. So what a great day. We're going to keep walking down this road. It's going to be about a 10-mile day, 5.5 to 6 on trail, and then 4 miles down on the road.